case may be transferred from one court to another court for the purpose of trial. The transfer must be allowed by the written law. The provision in the written law which allow for such transfer are found in the CPC, as well as other statutes conferring jurisdiction of courts. While transmission of case is commonly like transmitting a case from High Court with the presence of the public prosecutor, transmission of case mostly applicable for the death penalty cases. Okay, there are two different types of transfer of a criminal case. It is either bilateral and also by vertical transfer. Okay, a lateral transfer involves a court of coordinate or equal jurisdiction, like court of session to court of session, from magistrate court to another magistrate court, from high court to another court, to another high court. Okay, the court exercise similar jurisdiction to try and sentence. The only exception is in terms of its local jurisdiction. Okay, a vertical transfer involves a court of superior higher jurisdictions, but can be of the same local jurisdiction also. An example is like the magistrate to the session court, which exercise different jurisdiction to try and sentence, but can be one of the same local jurisdiction also.
Cases may be transferred from one court to another under various sections of the Criminal Procedure Code (CPC). Three sections that are relevant, namely Section 177, 417, and 418A. Section 177 gives ample powers to the magistrate to transfer the case to be brought before a higher court for a trial. As for the procedure, Section 177 stated that there are two situations where transfer may be made. They are when the magistrate believes that for whatever reason the case trial should be handled by a different court, and when the public prosecutor makes an application. The magistrate may transfer in any trial before him and at any stage of the proceeding. This also normally may take place if the magistrate feels his power of sentencing are inadequate and must do so before accepting the plea of guilty. If during the trial the application to transfer is made, and if the magistrate believes that another court should handle the case trial, the magistrate must halt the trials and transfer the case to that court. Besides that, although only the magistrate court is mentioned in Section 177, in the case of Tengku Abdul Aziz against PP, it was held that the word magistrate appearing in Section 173 of the CPC would include the session president, and as such, the summary trial procedure under Chapter 19 of the CPC will accurately apply to trials in the session court. By the same token, it is submitted the word magistrate in Section 177 of the CPC, which also comes under Chapter 19 of the CPC, should include the session court. Next, unlike Section 177, application for transfer of case under Section 417 will have to be made to the High Court. The ground on which an applicant may rely are set out in Section 417, subsection 1A to E, where subsection 1A accepts a request for transfer to the High Court when a criminal lower court can conduct a fair and impartial trial. Subsection 1B, where there is some question of law of unusual difficulty is likely to arise. Subsection 1C provides when the view of the place in or near which any offence has been committed may be required for the satisfactory trial of the same. Plus, when dealing with an application under this ground, the High Court may make the order as provided under Paras AA or Paras BB of subsection 1, section 417, which envisage lateral transfer. Next, subsection 1D, where it is for the sake of the party or witnesses' general convenience, and subsection 1E mention that transfer can be made where it is to secure justice. The High Court also may make the order as provided in Para CC of subsection 1, section 417, where it envisages a vertical transfer from either a magistrate court or session court to the High Court. Section 417, subsection 2 of the CPC also added that High Court can make an order to transfer the case either based on the lower court's reports or the application of the public prosecutor or the accused person or on its own initiative. Before the High Court make any order to transfer the case, it must be satisfied of at least one or more of the grounds listed in Section 417, subsection 1, A to E of the CPC. One latest relevant case that can be referred is the case of PP against Rosmah binti Mansur, where the respondent was charged for money laundering offences and for offences under the Malaysian Anti-Corruption Commission Act 2009 at the Session Court. The applicant, which is public prosecutor, applied to transfer the case, and the court in this case granted the application under Section 417, subsection 1E and Para CC of subsection 1 of the same provision to transfer the respondent cases from Session Court to the High Court. Therefore, Section 417 has shown that there are several reasons to apply for a case transfer, and Section 418 support the provision by stating that it will be by way of motion supported by an affidavit. But supporting affidavit is not necessary if the applicant is the public prosecutor. Besides that, Section 418A subsection 1 also allow the public prosecutor to provide a certificate mandating that the court where the case is now pending remove it to the High Court at the location stated in the certificate. This section involves executive discretion and is relevant only to cases that may be brought before a criminal court subordinate to the High Court. And according to Section 418A subsection 2 of the CPC, when the public prosecutor wants to act under this section, he does so personally, and the powers granted under this provision are only exercisable by the public prosecutor in cases where the accused has not entered a plea of guilty and no evidence has yet been introduced in support of the case against him, as it made clear under Section 418B of the CPC. That's all from me. Thank you.
Now I will be explaining regarding the transmission of cases. Transmission of cases is specifically provided under Section 177A of the CPC, whereby it permits the transmission of a criminal case for trial before the High Court. Besides that, transmission of cases can also be seen under the Section 41A and 39B of Dangerous Drugs Act and Section 11 of Firearms Increased Penalties Act, which will be explained later in the video. According to Section 177A subsection 1 of CPC, a prosecution for an offense that will be heard by the High Court may only be brought with the public prosecutor's approval. In this regard, Her Ladyship Sahara Ibrahim's explanation in the case of PP versus Anki Chain on the significance of the public prosecutor's consent pursuant to Section 177A of CPC to be produced prior to a case before being forwarded to the High Court for trial can be seen. This view was affirmed and followed by the Court of Appeal in the case of PP versus King Guan and Anor, where this demonstrates that while an arrest may be made, a warrant of arrest may be issued and carried out, and the person may be remanded in custody without the public prosecutor's approval. The matter will not be proceed with further prosecution until the public prosecutor's consent is acquired. In compliance with Section 177A, subsection 2 of the CPC, in any prosecution in the High Court, the accused will be brought before a magistrate court, which will, if a consent from the public prosecutor is produced, transmit the case to the High Court after reading and explaining the accusation to the accused. The accused then will thereafter show up in court as soon as it's possible at the High Court. And it is also important to note that if the accused is shown at the magistrate court without the approval of the public prosecutor, the accusation will merely be read to him and explained, but he will not be asked to answer a plea. Let us take a look into the case of Ola Datutun, Lukmaru, Umaru, and others. It was determined that, in this case, the public prosecutor's permission must be on hand and available before the magistrate transfer the matter to the High Court. Since the deputy public prosecutor is also the public prosecutor's alter ego, the consent need not be signed by the public prosecutor directly. Only the High Court has the authority to hear cases involving offenses of Section 302 of the Penal Code. Therefore, in situations containing a murder charge, the public prosecutor's approval is required in accordance with Section 177A of the CPC in order to forward the case to the High Court for trial. Thus, we can see this in the decision of the High Court at Kuching in the case of Percy Wong Kiat versus PP, wherein the pre-trial detention of an accused person prior to the case being transmitted to the High Court for trial on a charge of murder was viewed with abhorrence, where it was held that a reasonable period is necessary to ensure that all evidence, such as the necessary chemist report, is available before the trial is fixed in the High Court. In reality, the High Court had denied the request to change the magistrate decision to refuse to transmit the case to the High Court for trial in the absence of consent in accordance with Section 177A of the CPC. However, the High Court determined that in the interest of fairness, the case should be transmitted to the High Court for trial after the next mentioned date set by the magistrate. The High Court's judge actually agreed with the argument that Section 177A accurately captures the intention and goal of the procedures before the magistrate court, which is to make sure that there is enough evidence before the case is tried at the High Court. It is stated once more that this can only happen when the public prosecutor grants the consent to prosecute, which actually denotes that the case is prepared for a High Court trial. For crimes like drug trafficking, the public prosecutor must obtain permission and submit a request in accordance with Section 41A and 39B, subsection 3 of the DDA, which is the Dangerous Drugs Act. This is in accordance with Section 3 of the CPCs, which is Generalia Specialibus Non-Derogant concept. Section 39B, subsection 3 of the DDA, contains the permission to prosecute for a crime under Section 39B, which is drug trafficking. In accordance with Section 41A of the DDA, the public prosecutor is requesting and requiring the High Court to try the drug trafficking offense. So we can see this in the case of PP versus Marwan bin Ismail, where the Court of Appeal explained the procedures a magistrate must follow before referring a case containing a drug trafficking offense to the High Court. The High Court and the Court of Appeal in this case did not accept the delay in transmitting the matter for trial to the High Court on the grounds that the chemist's report regarding the nature and weight of the dangerous drugs was not yet ready. In fact, the case in this instance was referred to the High Court for trial without the public prosecutor's permission or request, and the Court of Appeal eventually upheld this decision. Last but not least is the transmission of firearms cases. So similar to Section 41A of the Dangerous Drugs Act, Section 11 of the Firearms Increased Penalties Act also addresses crimes involving weapons and provides that the public prosecutor may demand that the case be sent to the High Court for trial. So that is all for me. I'll move on to the next presenter.
The terms of transfer and transmission of cases are used interchangeably in practice. It is said to be confusing to distinguish. However, in scrutinizing the transfer and transmission of cases, there seem to be a few distinctions between the two. One of the prominent distinctions between the two is on the cases that are to be transferred or transmitted. The transfer of a case involves taking a case with ordinary trial and local jurisdiction to a court with a higher jurisdiction. In the case of public prosecutor against Ghulam Russo bin Ismail and another, where it was explained that the transfer of cases can only be made to a court which possesses the jurisdiction to hear and determine the case, in contrast to the transmission of cases, which facilitates to place a case before the High Court. The transmission of a case can be made with the consent of the public prosecutor, even when the subordinate court has the jurisdiction for the case to be tried. Another distinction between the two can be observed in Section 177A of the Criminal Procedure Code. It highlights the need for consent of the public prosecutor for the transmission of cases. In the case of public prosecutor against An Ki Cheng and another, where it is stated that a magistrate cannot transmit a case to the High Court without the consent of the public prosecutor. In contrast to the application of transfer of cases, it does not mention the requirement of the consent of the public prosecutor. The provision only indicates that the trial application is to be made by the public prosecutor, and the magistrate shall stay proceedings and transfer the case to a High Court. And lastly, one minor distinction that can be highlighted between the two is on the judge's discretion in determining the transfer or transmission of a case. Based on the case of public prosecutor against Tiong King Guan, it was held that a magistrate or sessions court judge has no discretion to refuse the transmission of a case to the High Court. However, in the application to transfer a case, Section 418 subsection 3 of the Criminal Procedure Code suggests that the judge has the discretion to refuse the application of transfer of a case made by an accused.
The judiciary as whole is held in the highest regard, and it's expected that it would provide highly equitable and fair justice to everyone who comes before it or requires a true resolution of any complaint. The court should always uphold fair perspective and administer justice in a way that sends a clear message to all parties involved that the justice has been done. Therefore, the Criminal Procedure Code Section 417 highlighted the factors to be taken into consideration while transferring a criminal case. That a fair and impartial trial cannot be had in any criminal court subordinate to it. That some question of law of unusual difficulty is like to arise. That a view of the place in or near which any offence has been committed may be required for the satisfactory trial of the same. that an order under this section will tend to the general convenience of the parties or witness, or that such an order is expedient for the end of justice, or it's required by a provision of this court.